Welcome to the studio. Today I am going to be making this botanical print with this amazing antique frame. In today's video, I am going to be using the amazing casting resin from Aluminite, an unfinished picture frame, which actually is brand new, came in a package like this. And I'm also going to be using the Trimmings 4 mold, which is a new spring mold from IOD. And we're going to be using the smaller size of this trimming, although it is still pretty big. It is a little over 2 inches, and it is perfect for the size of this frame. So the first thing I have to do is I have to mix up some of the casting resin. So with the casting resin from Aluminite, you need to have equal parts of each component A and component B, and stir them really well. Now my bottles look a little bit funky, but the product inside is perfect. The other thing I'm doing is I'm adding a little bit of a milk paint powder. I want my resin to come out colored. I don't want it to be white. I want it to have a deep gray color to it, so that when I paint it, if I end up distressing it, it's going to come back gray. Now you can purchase powders that will dye your resin from Aluminite, or there's several of the companies that have powdered additives that you can add to the resin. Well, it's a liquid for dyeing the resin, but the milk paint powder has worked great for me, and that's what I'm doing. So once I've got it all stirred in really well, I'm going to pour it into the mold, and I'm making sure it's going all the way to the edge. I want to make sure that my resin casting is super flat, because I need to put it on this frame. So while my resin is setting, I am going to go ahead and do a primer on my frame, and I'm just sealing the wood with just a basic primer. And then once that resin is all done, and it takes about, I would say, 10 or 15 minutes. I didn't really measure it, although it took me a long time to make all of the castings to cover the entire front of this frame. Casting is set, I slip it out of the mold, and it's very pliable when you first take it out, and that's how you want to go ahead and glue it right down right away. So I am going to be using the heavy body gel from Pentart to glue down all my castings. So I am going to just apply that to the back and go ahead and make another piece. So I just continued to make pieces, and I think I made 6 different castings of this exact same mold. Each one I added the milk powder to, and I never measured it, so you can tell the grays are a little different. But when I got to the corners, I wanted a really nice mitered corner, so I had made this little template so that I could get the miters just right. I was kind of on my own while I was doing this. Usually my husband helps me, and he is really excellent at cutting miters, but I kind of didn't do too bad at it. But I did cut the miters when that casting was still super pliable. I used my super sharp scissors and got a really nice sharp edge, and I cut both angles with both sides. I just flipped the other I flipped my little template up the other way to cut the other angle. This little piece was a little tricky. It kind of got a little bit too, the angle got cut a little bit too long, and I did have to cut it afterwards after it had gotten pretty hard. It wasn't pliable anymore, but it still worked out. And then I just, again, I am applying the, excuse me, I'm applying the heavy body gel to the back, and I leave some along the edge that connects with the other edge, just because I really want that to be a tight fit right there. And some of it squishes out and I wipe it away. It's going to leave some residue, but it doesn't really matter because we're putting several coats of paint on this, so it's not going to be visible later on. And it's amazing how well these just the way they designed this particular casting so that they just fit together so perfectly. You can see the miters on my finished frame, but you cannot find where they the beginning of one and the ending of one of the pieces of the trimmings is. It worked out just so perfectly. And one thing I really did try to do is when I was pouring the resin, to make sure I poured all of the resin to the top of the mold. There was one piece that didn't quite have enough resin in it, and so it was a little bit lower, and that was obvious when I finished the frame, but you don't notice it once it's all painted and distressed. Now, like I said, I just wiped that away. And I did wear gloves throughout most of working with the resin and also working with the heavy body gel, because it does really stick to your fingers. I will leave a link to where you can purchase all these products in the description. By the time I'm here, I'm at actually I'm cutting almost the third corner. I got pretty good at the miters and I got them exactly how I wanted them. So it worked out. It's worth doing the miter. It looks so much better than if you cut it off at the edge and then, have another one just kind of aimlessly cut off also. So much better to miter those corners. Really looks like a real antique when it's done. And each piece, again, I take it out when it is still pliable. Especially because I'm going to be cutting it. You want to cut it when it is still soft and pliable. Now, if I was going to do another frame like this, I would like to get two of the molds and have some help, just because it takes so long to set up, to get the resin into the mold, let the mold set up, and then take it out, and then cut it, and then glue it down, and then you're starting from scratch with another one. Whereas if you had a helper or two molds, you could do much more, get much more done faster. And since I am going to make a set of these, I am going to go ahead and get another mold. And I will, again, I buy my molds from Serendipity House, and I will put her link in the description. So if you want to try this project, you can grab the mold from her. At this point, it looks like I took the gloves off, and that is when my fingers got covered with a heavy body gel, and it takes a while to get it off because it really has an amazing adhesion. And I am using a baby wipe to get that little bit of the heavy body gel, and this one does not dry clear, so if you see a little bit of white, it does dry opaque. It's one of the ones that can be used through a stencil, but it is what I always use to glue down my castings, whether it's resin or clay. And I'm almost done. I have one more piece to make, and you can see how pliable it is, but you can see I didn't use quite as much milk paint powder in this one, so it's a little bit lighter, but it doesn't matter. It's not white, it's still gray, and it's going to be just fine. And it fits, just look at that perfect fit right in that little section. Good miter and really good connecting the pieces. Now, if you were using clay, I think the spaces might open up a little bit. I haven't used clay with this big giant mold yet, but I'm going to try it and see what happens. And this did add quite a bit of weight. The frame ended up being a little bit heavy with all of that those resin pieces. But like I said, it moves right, fits right into that place there. Just wipe back some of that glue, and then what I did is, right after I finished and I knew that the heavy body gel had dried, it was time to paint it. And I am painting it at this point with a bronze metallic, which it actually could actually look like an antique gold, but it's called bronze. It is a Wise Owl paint, and it is a metallic paint. Goes on really nice, very, very excellent finish. And I am just really I'm using a circular motion because I'm really trying to get the bronze into all the little grooves and the little nooks and crannies of this design. I really want to it's got to look really authentic. And a little of this paint goes a long way. I do the underside, where you're going to see, and the outside of this frame. And as you can see, it's starting to look very much like gold. Now, there were a few places that I missed, and I could see the gray, but I never went back and did them because, again, there's two more coats of different paints that are going to go on top of this, and you will never see them. That's why I ended up making sure that my casting was gray. Again, pushing it really down, get in all the little crevices. Very, very detailed mold. And then once it was totally painted, I let it dry overnight. Totally let it dry. And the reason I let it dry overnight is because I'm going to use a baby wipe to once I glaze it. And if I hadn't let the metal paint dry overnight, it could have easily wiped right off. So now what I'm using is an antiquing gel. This is Pentart antiquing gel, and you could use a glaze or whatever you wanted to use, but I'm using the antiquing gel. And again, I am just working that antiquing gel into the background, really pushing it into all the so that it's in the back, and then I wipe it off the high point with a baby wipe. And I wipe it off as I'm going along. Even though the glaze has a pretty good open time, I like to wipe it off right away. And just wiping off the high points, keeping that dark antiquing glaze in the background. And I think you can see in that's the corner where one of the castings was a little bit lower than the other one right there and to the right. So you could see it a little bit raised up. And I went ahead and really pushed a lot of paint into those corners, so you couldn't see the miter so much. Here's a little bit of a close-up so you could see that the the glaze is in, or the gel is in the background. I'm just wiping it off of the high places. And the bronze, or the brass, I think it might be even called brass metallic, is not real shiny. It's kind of, it does come out kind of a little bit matte. But there it is, that step. And then I just pretty much dry brushed the sides with what was left on the brush of the glaze rather than really putting a lot on. Just use whatever was left. And then I let that dry completely. The very last step is to add another metallic paint, and what I am using is called Gold Dust, and it is another Wise Owl metallic paint, and I am just hitting the tops of the design with it. And the reason I'm doing this is to add a little bit of warmth, but also to introduce another color, which kind of makes it look, definitely gives it a little more interest. And the gold dust is a little bit more, has a little more sheen to it. So it really, I mean, you can see just adding that little, and I'm totally just adding a little bit of dry brush. And the reason I'm dry brushing and taking it off of onto a paper towel before I put it onto onto the casting is I don't want blobs. I don't want any blobs. I just want it to hit those top parts of the design to just warm the whole thing up. I think sometimes it's these little details, the final little details, that make all the difference. And just dry brushing that gold on just made such a huge difference to this frame. And right now I want to make sure every one of them roses has a little bit of gold paint on it. So I went around one more time to make sure I got every one of those flowers, because they're just so delicate and they're just so pretty. And there it is, all done. And because this is botanical print, you've got to have a botanical print to go in this frame. And I am listing the places where you can get a print that's in the public domain in the it'll be in the description. And that's all I did, is I just went online and I grabbed a couple prints that I liked, and that's what I am using for inside my frame. My frame has glass, and I've been handling that glass, so I am wiping off the back of that glass. And there is the print that I am going to use inside my frame. Now, I printed it on an antique paper to really give it that antique look, the background. And one of the things I did notice is you can't see the typography down the bottom, and I really wanted to have even just a little bit of typography. So what I am using is the ephemeral type stamp, and that was from not the most recent release. And I'm going to use one of the stamps which just has a little signature and a date, and I'm actually going to overlap the flowers a little bit. I am using an archival ink. It is a vintage paper, and I'm just going to put that down the bottom. Now, you can print these designs as big as you want. Basically, they are, this is part of a book, so it comes full size and it's pretty big, but you could make it a little smaller so that it was more centered in the frame. I really wanted to have all of that color, so I made it, when I printed this botanical print, I printed it full size. And here I am stamping that little bit of, just a little bit of type. And then into the frame it goes. slips right in there, and then the fiberboard goes right on the back. And those little prongs are so easy to just push them down with your finger, which makes it really, really nice. And then my picture is all set, the first of my botanical prints that is actually being done to put on a wall that I am redoing for staging for a house. And there's the frame with the picture in it. And here it is up on the wall. Love how it came out.